All right, so maybe, oh, it's not even 1 o'clock yet, so we do have a second before we need to begin. Let that person come in here. I'll give it like a little buffer of a couple seconds, and then I'll go into the intro.
Thank you for your patience, everyone. We're glad you could join us for this.
It's always nice to come to a Zoom meeting early because you can see the back end stuff. Now, Brian and Keith, I'm seeing like a black box in the middle of the, okay. I think that
might have been the challenge.
Yeah, I opened up the participants box just
Got
to
it.
see how many people we had. So I will refrain from doing that.
Okay.
Brian.
Okay.
That's all good. All right. All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour, and I definitely don't want to go over since we're all going to have our final keynote in this room at 2, and I want to give everybody enough time. So I think what we'll do is resist the temptation to turn on the auto captioning. And I will try to speak as clearly as possible. And then if the captioners haven't shown up by the time Brian and Keith get started, then I will send them an email and I'll track them down. Okay, so fantastic. Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. I am Carolyn Bennett-Glauda from Southeastern New York Library Resources Council, and I'm on the Pillars Planning Committee. My pronouns are she and her. And I want to thank you for joining us for this presentation, Helping Undergraduate English Language Learners Through Information Literacy Obstacles. Before we get started, I just want to take care of some housekeeping. I'm joined by my colleague, Caitlin Kenny, who is available to help you with any technical problems you have during this presentation. And that includes the sound, the captioning, seeing the video, or obtaining your CE certificates. If you need assistance in any of those realms, just drop her a line in the chat. She's using the name ESLN. We will be utilizing the chat today as well as the Q&A feature for this presentation. So we'd appreciate it if you could change your settings so that your messages are going to everyone rather than just all panelists. And you can change this by opening your chat box and clicking on the drop-down menu above the text box. And I encourage you to introduce yourselves there now. Let us know who you are and where you're from. You can use the Q&A feature to ask questions so they don't get lost in the chat, and you can find that towards the bottom center of your screen. Hopefully, pretty soon, live captioning will be available for this webinar. We are using a cart service for live transcriptions. So when that becomes enabled, you can toggle the subtitles on the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen, and you can choose either show subtitle or hide subtitle. And I see something just popped up, so that might be enabled now. We also have, as you can see, an American Sign Language interpreter joining us, and you can see their video on the screen next to the presenter. So all attendees are expected to follow the Pillars Code of Conduct, which is outlined in the conference program. And in summary, please treat all staff, event attendees, and speakers with respect. If there's anyone who doesn't adhere to the Code of Conduct, you will be removed from the webinar. All presentations in this conference will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be shared in the next few days. So please check your email for that link. You can keep an eye on the chat. About 3/4 of the way through, we will drop a link there for the CE certificates, and you will need to attend the live broadcast to get that link. If you want to share on social media, you can follow along the event using the hashtag Pillars2020. So now that I've completed the housekeeping, I'd like to introduce Brian and Keith, our next presenters.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. So we are here to talk about how we have worked with some undergraduate English language learners for a number of years, and we hope that you enjoy our presentation. I'm going to turn my camera off now so you can just pay attention to the slides. So just to introduce ourselves, I'm Brian Sajecki. I am a student support and engagement librarian at the University of Buffalo. And I've been at UB since 2016. And I probably taught about a gajillion students, to be completely honest with you, mostly undergraduates and first years. But my interests in librarianship center around accessibility and availability of information, as well as using education to build long-lasting relationships with students.
Hello, my name is Keith Nichols, and I'm also a student support and engagement librarian at the University of Buffalo. I started here in 2017, but spent the previous 5 years at the University of Georgia. Go Bulldogs, won Natty last year, where I also earned a master's degree in public health. My interests are petting dogs, pizza in all forms and varieties, but more importantly, I'm interested in evaluating learning, especially with our undergraduate students, and trying to deliver high impact instructions to those same students. All right, so this is what we hope you learn today. We will be identifying some of the basic strategies for UDL, which is Universal Design for Learning. This might be review for some of you, but we'll be treating it as if you are completely new to the concepts. Next, we'll be discussing some of the specific approaches that we have used in teaching information literacy to students in a more accessible way. Finally, we implore you to think about how you use or could use some of our successful strategies. And again, you're going to want to warp them to improve your own lessons.
So what exactly is UDL? There is a lot to it, but in its simplest terms, it's really just a framework for curriculum and development. It exists on flexibility and also being able to adapt to what fits your needs as an instructor and the needs of your students. So think of your instruction methods as something like Play-Doh. You're able to mold your lessons and your activities in this light, and it helps to stimulate more engagement from students. It is also a set of principles focused on augmenting and bolstering the ever-changing knowledge and needs of your students, not just in the classroom, but beyond it too.
UDL for us revolves around engagement of the students. So our students work together in self-assessment and will give each other feedback, often without even realizing they are doing so. They begin to fill in knowledge gaps that exist simply due to individual life experiences. It involves multiple forms of representation or presenting of course content. Think of it as the ultimate hybridization of a course. Since the onset of COVID-19, this is something that instructors are very acquainted with. It is like an educational battle strategy on all fronts. So it includes tutorial videos, gamification of learning, active learning strategies, and of course, even lectures. The output we're looking for is expression, which refers to outward communication towards each other from our students. So they do this through assignments that they complete. You begin to quickly see the voices that students are often reluctant to show in the different types of outputs that they create. We'd like to focus on multimodality, which is a key tenet here, because it empowers our students to work in unique mediums beyond the typical, like creating a digital object versus just writing a research paper.
So this brings us to something that we actively as a team began to employ in 2017, and it is the concept of social constructivism. By definition, it is a pedagogical theory that encompasses student interaction and socialization with each other to build upon individual personalized knowledge, which is something that we were just referring to in the tenets. Instead of focusing on assignments and tasks as an individual, students work together in groups, and then they make sense of new information obstacles. Students encounter benchmarks that are purposefully scaffolded. They're purposefully put there so that certain skills are built with each intervention we have. And then the next intervention, or the time that we teach them next, they use those skills to attain new ones. By the end, each group works towards completing a final project. And in our case, we focus on something multimodal, like an infographic or a slide deck that employs all the skills they developed through the weeks of instruction and practice. This model is completely student-centered, and it relies on each student really relying on each other to make the best use of personalized knowledge. Of course, this model can be used with any type of final deliverable. So think of things beyond research papers like podcasts, or maybe a blog, or something that really involves more or less not a research paper, anything beyond that.
To orient you to who we are a little bit more, we recognize that not everybody maybe lives or works in the University of Buffalo area up here in Buffalo, New York. We saw a lot of people in the chat were from other places, perhaps downstate. Yes, I'm throwing that out there. Since we're always upstate, I'm going to throw out some downstate. So who are we? Like, what is going on here? University of Buffalo is a tier 1 research institute with campuses in the city of Buffalo itself and in Amherst, which is actually where Brian and I are.
What is a tier 1 research institute then?
So a tier 1 research institute is a classification of university, basically, and it has to do with how much funding that we're getting via grants, how much research we're actually producing, as well as, how many programs, doctoral programs, graduate programs, and undergraduate programs we have. So I think we're I think there's 125 currently.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
It sounds about right. So it's a big place full of a lot of people. We currently have actually about 21,000 undergraduates, and that kind of bumps up each year, which makes our lives complicated sometimes.
No, of course.
Since 2016, the Education Services team, which is who we basically work for at the UB Libraries, has been working with a writing and rhetoric course from the English department. Now, a subsect of this course lives within the English Language Institute. It's a department that assists our international undergraduate students in acquiring sophisticated use of English at the university level through a sequence of English courses that fulfill UB's communication literacy requirement. So that's part of your general education requirements for UB, basically. So each semester we have 4 to 8 sections of these ELI, English Language Institute courses. And that is actually a 1 credit hour we are responsible for out of their 4 credit course. So we actually grade them out for 1 credit hour. We currently call this lab our iLab or information lab. And since 2016, this course has evolved and been reiterated multiple times to, 1, keep it fresh for us, and to hopefully, keep it updated and keep improving it for our students.
So we are currently in the process of doing this for the fall. So we are going to tediously meet over the next month and a half, just to ensure that everything is working correctly. And we're also going to be kind of looking towards moving into a different learning management system, which is going to be hitting UB sooner than later. So there's always a lot of different things that we're considering here when we're putting these things together. All right, so I have this image on the screen right now, the ACRL Framework for Information Literacy for Higher Education. It's typically called just the ACRL Framework, and if there's anything that librarians love more than acronyms, it's another framework. Yeah, woo! But all jokes aside, this is the building block of information literacy instruction. So if you're not familiar with it, if you're coming from a different place, not necessarily academia, what this is pretty much just an assembling of core concepts that incorporate flexibility in terms of implementation. So think of it as another set of guidelines. And this one just really focuses more on concepts as opposed to action or intervention. It is also left up to interpretation by each librarian. So it's not really one size fits all. Things change, and it's up to whatever type of interpretation. Either way, I've been doing this library stuff for about 10 years, okay? And I've worked in many different venues of librarianship, but I've been in academia now for about 6. And the way that I personally interpret this is, at the top, we have authority is constructed and contextual. To me, that means Authority of information is multifaceted, including both the place it lives as well as the context in which it was created. This is a concept that is difficult for students to understand, but it is the first thing that we usually attack. So the second thing, information creation is a process. Yeah, the creation of information has a process, but the process, it takes multiple steps, some of which are extraneous and actually hard to access. When we try to work with our students, that accessibility point is definitely something that they struggle with. So information, it has inherent value, regardless of where it comes from. This includes looking beyond the source that it might be in front of you. It might be unearthing sources that look a little strange or you haven't seen before. So research, it involves inquiry, yes. It's a messy process. It should make one think about the information that they're looking at. Really question everything. Is everything that you're looking at real? Is it good? What purpose does it have? Next, scholarship. And in and of itself, it is a conversation, and it's a conversation between multiple individuals. A student's research endeavors should really incorporate old ideas that have been published with new perspectives that they're starting to understand. And they're young in the research process. They're first-year undergraduate students. They come from different backgrounds, different places in the world, and they might have different perspectives. They might have biases. So it's really an interesting thing to see how and what they value. And then lastly, the search for information is heightened when a well thought out search strategy is employed, as opposed to just pounding the keyboard and clicking on the first thing that you find because that is the easiest thing. Accessibility, availability of information, students really gravitate towards the easiest thing that they can find. So the fun part of the framework, like I said, is that it isn't a one-size-fits-all model. And we really like that in education, because as a librarian and an educator, you can do whatever you want as long as you attribute your lesson plans and your interventions to the aspects of it. So needless to say, we will and we do consistently make sure all of our lesson plans align with it.
All right. So some of the challenges that we have to constantly contend with, some of them we have faced over time have been kind of natural, that have cropped up just as challenges do, and some of them have actually been self-created by our team when there's been some oversight or we make an assumption, and this can happen for anyone. So our first issue is always going to be scale, and that's not just to do with how many sections of this course that we're talking about, but it has to do with the time and the human resources constraints. Teaching all of these students can be rough. A team of 7 librarians seems large, but we have countless responsibilities on top of teaching this course, which includes lesson planning, weekly grading, on-the-fly changes. We do have other things going on. Brian and I, for example, are both liaisons to UB's Athlete Academic Affairs department and resident education department. We work closely with student athletes on a weekly basis, as well as provide workshops in the residence halls 8 times a semester. On top of that, we also teach a suite of information literacy courses for our native English speakers in their version of the English 105 course. So that helps us get to those other 21,000, undergrads that we, mentioned. We try to hit all of the incoming freshmen, or as many of them as we can. And we're responsible for 8 to 10 sections of that English 105 course and going in and teaching them. This means that we have to think about the 2 S's, which is success and sanity. Our job is not our life. Trust us, we've had this conversation more times than we can think of. So you have to figure out how to balance those 2 things. Next, the ever-present issue of student apathy. It is very much unavoidable in every sense with library instruction, but in our experience, we know that the subject matter can be less than entertaining. Sometimes students get bored. It happens. Libraries are often seen as a point of need for students, and if they haven't needed it in the past, they tend to avoid it. We often encounter students who have felt that library instruction is condescending because they think they know everything. They can use Google, right? You can just Google this. Well, that's great. But there are other ways to research than just Googling and finding sources, especially when we get to that side of evaluating information, which I think is really powerful to a lot of our students when they start to understand how we evaluate information. And this especially is true of our students where English is a second language, because depending on where they're coming from culturally, how they view information changes. So we've purposely kind of constructed ILAD to be this hybridized kind of thing that exists out in the world. So we have access to technology in class that's integral. However, laptops break, students can't afford them. So we understand that there has to be other ways to get access to the information we're trying to provide our students. So we try to go beyond that. We upload videos that we expect our students to watch. Sometimes they actually manage to watch it on their own. But we have to make sure that those videos have things like closed captioning, which we just talked about in this section. Tutorials that we upload, they need text transcripts. And then there's the whole phenomenon of our current students supposedly being some kind of digital natives. What does that mean? What doesn't it mean? Technology woes are plentiful. Saving documents in the correct form, saving images, downloading software, using Google Drive, using Microsoft products, writing and checking emails. For the most part, in our experience, if it's not Snapchat, Instagram, or TikTok, chances are it's somewhat foreign to them. It can be difficult for them to use. It can be a new challenge that they have to overcome. And again, when we're talking about, trying to make content accessible, if it's living inside of a learning management system, an LMS, and we don't teach the students how to use that, or how to download things, or how to upload things, or whatever it happens to be, we're failing them. So hopefully this gives you kind of a good frame of where we are coming from and how we kind of approach it. And we're going to talk more about how we approach it next.
So there are plenty of barriers for English language learners. What we try to do in our course construction is always have this considered. We try to combat as much as possible within our interventions. However, it doesn't matter how well crafted you think your lesson plan, information literacy is tricky. And one of the big reasons for that is library jargon. Now, we know that this was already brought up in a past presentation earlier today, but it is important. It's incredibly important. Simply put, students often look confused when we use contrived words. Some examples here: bibliographic instruction, abstract, Boolean searching, truncation, known items, records, subject headings. I could keep going. There's all of these. There's so many of them. We all know them.
My favorite is bibliographic instruction, because I can say that to any student on our campus right now, and I would say basically all of them would just look at me like I had put on some sort of terrifying Halloween mask and jumped out and said boo.
Yeah, obviously. Boolean.
Oh man.
Yeah.
We didn't even write that in the script.
No, we did
It's
not.
a joke.
Some of the words honestly are just unavoidable here, and we know that, but we have built bridges to have them make sense to our learners. One of the strangest things we have encountered is the embarrassment of a lack of English language proficiency. Our lesson plans involve class involvement and active learning, and we want them to get up and do things and talk, but we've witnessed students, they're reluctant to speak sometimes because they cannot fully articulate what they want to say. It can be trying to get these students comfortable enough to speak out loud. Also, sometimes if you put students into groups, depending on culturally where they're from or how proficient they believe they are in English, they might rely on one person in the group to speak for everybody else. So then everybody else, like say it's a group of 4 people, one person's the quote unquote leader, and then 3 people are the followers, and they don't say anything and they just look at each other and one person speaks for everybody. It's incredibly awkward, but it happens sometimes. And it's something that we try to combat like immediately, but it is difficult. One of the things that we've realized is the best medicine is to kind of avoid forcing it though. Try to have it organic, be natural. When a student is ready to, they'll talk. and they might have that conversation with you in private. It might be after class. It might even be through an email. It might be really out of left field, and it might be about something that has nothing to do with class. So yeah.
I agree. And the one thing that I just want to add is, especially our students from China will often actually switch and toggle their laptops between, Western characters and Chinese characters. And so sometimes when you go over to help them, the reason that you can't right away is because they're reading in a language that I do not understand, and they're reading in characters that I do not understand. And you have to be cognizant of that, and you have to be aware of that, and you have to be, I want to say, gentle with how you kind of ask them questions, because you can't just walk up to them and tell them that they have to switch their computer back to something you can read. They're reading in a language that they understand better because they're trying to, accomplish the task you've set for them. So it does involve a lot of understanding and a lot of give and take between the instructor and the students to try to be as understanding as you possibly can, while also making sure that you're helping those students learn what you're trying to teach them.
Sensitivity and patience, definitely two key qualities here. We also really try our best to find ways to provide different types of learning materials that students can access outside of the classroom, surely due to the lack of time we have in person with them. Remember, we're only responsible for 1 credit hour here, so whatever we do shouldn't really be that heavy of a lift for them. And it very well might be because of just generally the type of things that we're teaching them. So we do things like provide a LibGuide, which will get thousands of views a year. That includes different pieces like citation information, shortcuts for that, how to find images, how to definitely give credit where credit is due, and also sometimes pieces of what their final project is supposed to look like. And then we also have videos, tutorial videos, and examples of what our expectations are in our learning management system, UB Learns, which is just a Blackboard. It might seem obvious, but educators often outthink themselves when it comes to writing assignments and explaining themselves. Too many instructions with too many steps are confusing to students because they tend to get lost. Some never even go back to check and see if they're answering the questions being asked of them, especially when they are hurrying to get an assignment done. Students fail to understand the process, that what we are doing from start to finish, it was built that way so that they can use their collective experiences and newly acquired knowledge towards a final assignment and towards future classwork. UB is a tier 1 research institute, and a lot of the professors believe that students inherently have these really robust research skills. They don't. So this is our first time to get them into the different things and learn the different skills that are going to be really fruitful for their whole time here at the University at Buffalo.
And really, the way that we've done this, and we've touched on this some, is through multimodal learning. That's what iLab is really all about. We want to engage students on all fronts. That's kind of what we said earlier. And this is where a lot of our UGL strategies actually come into play. Our lessons typically involve weekly class activities that get the students up, get them interacting, talking, and working in different ways. Trust us when we say we make really good use of our classroom's whiteboards. Another example would be in week 3 of the semester. Our lessons involve actually having students put pictures of fish, I know, fish, on the whiteboards. And the way that this works is each of the fish has something like a tweet or a Snapchat story or a newspaper article or a scholarly article on it. And we tell them that it's the sea of information so that they can help conceptualize the cycle of information using these sources. So, the shallower pieces of information to the, more in-depth pieces of information. It might seem childish at first, but we're trying to tap into that childlike curiosity and silliness that is the key to connecting with our students when it comes to information literacy concepts. We want them to be able to have some fun with this and to play in a way. As we get further into the process, groups work on a research question and they take out their key concepts and they create simple keywords and they map them on a whiteboard. And we typically have students from different groups go to different whiteboards and provide feedback. We create advanced keyword charts based off of the work that they've done with their research questions and show them how to do synonyms and truncations to heighten their searches and make them better. All these active learning strategies are accompanied by videos, either custom or ones that we found with closed captioning. So we also provide accessible Word documents and PDFs, as well as infographics for key concepts. And a lot of this stuff overlaps. So if there's a video on how to create a keyword chart, there's then going to be an activity on creating the keyword chart. There's probably some sort of either PDF, Word document, or infographic on how to do a keyword chart. So they get it in 3 different ways that they can interact with, and they can understand that, okay, if I didn't quite, understand in class because maybe I spoke too fast, me being the instructor, maybe I was running low on time, again, me being the instructor, so I had to, kind of move quickly. They have something they can go back and rely on. They have something else that they can look at. This allows our students to interact with this information we are trying to impart in various methods so that they can work with one that not only helps them learn, but also allows them to stay engaged in a class. Because once you leave a student behind, once that happens, they disengage, and we don't want that to be the outcome.
Keith brought up a very important point here with time. Now, the research question construction and the keyword construction and the advanced keyword chart, yeah, we'll dedicate full weeks to this, but we need more time than that. We always have to do a lot more in our interventions to get them to that next point of understanding what is a high level research question. What can you do here? Is this going to be good enough? How can we really change this and warp this, which relies on the ACRL framework of research as a process that's messy. A lot of these students really feel like it needs to be perfect the first time. And it is not perfect the first time. And it's okay. It's supposed to be bad. It's supposed to be kind of inferior because you don't know what you don't know. So patience, it's a virtue. It really is, especially as an instructor. And it needs to be as a student. And this population of students, which is used to getting things right all the time, needs to embrace that change of, I need to work on this a little bit more so I can really sharpen my skills and get to that next level. To actively start all of our students on the same page, we create starter packs that prime our students with background knowledge before they even begin the research process. And we give them a canned topic that we provide. This does not discredit if a student already has background knowledge about said topic, but it merely puts all group members on a level playing field. So the starter packs, they're going to reside in UB Learns, and they're all available all semester. They include various resources about the broad topic. And the first thing, and we can thank Molly Maloney, who's actually an attendee here for this, because she used to be one of our team members, with TED Talks. We embed a video in UB Learns, and we also link to the TED Talk. Why do we do this? Because TED Talks have multilingual transcripts, closed captioning, and audio. So this allows for more inclusion and better engagement. And we'll pick a TED Talk that is loosely related to whatever topic that we've given them in that group. It could be really specific, it could be very out of left field, but it is something that has to do with that topic. Just to get a little acquainted, because students would typically want to watch videos as opposed to reading a paper or an article. Secondly, a popular source. Haha, library jargon. Yeah, I won't say popular source, no. I'm going to say article from a magazine or a newspaper when we'll talk about what the source type is. Why is it a magazine? Why is it a newspaper? Where is it from? So on and so forth. This is usually their first foray into authority because the information resides in an article format. And then this article format comes from a database, and we all know databases are scary. That's a really fun lesson when we start talking about that. Lastly, we're going to provide them with a scholarly or peer-reviewed journal article that introduces them to heavy levels of research and what really goes into that scholarly conversation. Being that they're first-year college students, we're going to really introduce this later in the semester after benchmark skills are achieved.
The nice thing about giving them a video, a newspaper, and a scholarly peer-reviewed article right from the start that gives them the background information on their topic is then we can refer back to each 3 pieces of information, talk about it in the cycle of information, and also explain where these different pieces fit into the larger scholarly conversation that is going on. So it automatically gives them kind of the 3 biggest buckets of this is where you're going to pull information from. So you have, videos and podcasts, some sort of audio thing from the internet. You have more kind of everyday sources like your newspapers, news stories. We could even kind of maybe throw some social media stuff into this bucket. And then you have your scholarly peer-reviewed books, articles, all that sort of thing. So it gives them a great example of all 3 things. So when they start doing research, they'll start to familiarize themselves with each of these 3 things. So again, it's building up their knowledge, because if they don't have that underlying framework, you're not actually helping them. You're just pushing them out of a boat and telling them you expect them to swim. Now, before we even do starter packs, as our students, we have to orientate them to our course, which is, I did it. I said orientate. I know. We have to orient them to our course. Fixed it. And that's something that we did for this presentation. We tried to orient you to what we do and why we do it. We want an example that's easy to understand and works really well cross-culturally. In the past, we have done canned topics such as Rust Belt, which is completely foreign to students from Europe and Asia. They do not know what the Rust Belt is. They have never invested time in understanding the Great Lakes and their industrial regions of the 18 and 1900s and what happened after that. Beyond that, we have, Americanisms that are sometimes unavoidable. So for instance, if something's out of left field, or, I say y'all every once in a while, these are things that maybe our students might not understand, and we try to be cognizant of them. But you're not going to be able to avoid all of this stuff. It's just not possible. You are a product of where you come from. So don't stress out if you ever, say something that maybe you wish you hadn't. We all do.
And I'm probably one of the most sarcastic people that was ever created in the world. And my delivery sometimes is so dry that people can't tell where I'm going and what I'm doing and why I'm saying what I'm saying. So I have to understand my personality. And when I'm up on that stage, when I'm performing as an instructor, I have to temper that a little bit. So it really goes into understanding yourself too. And the way that you are in the classroom may not be exactly who you are outside of the classroom.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just got to take more time to help students understand, or to help someone who, might have, something going on outside of, your knowledge. You might need to take the time to help them understand, and that's okay. So our overarching desire is to make our students as comfortable as possible, not only with the materials, but with us, because we're all human, regardless of what we look like or where we're from. So our first lesson incorporates food. And the idea that we're still working on is called the research recipe. So again, we're trying to start building this framework of pre-existing knowledge to new knowledge. So please don't steal this from us. We will come looking for you. But thinking about it, humans need sustenance. We need to eat. Therefore, if we can correlate food to research, we're hopefully, going to use an example that our students can resonate with. And usually we bring up something like rice. Rice is incorporated into thousands of recipes in many countries around the world. So we'd like to posit a question: what is your favorite food that has rice in it? This creates a natural dialogue. If you ask the right questions, students will tell you what the food is, what is in it beyond the rice, such as why they like it, where they get the best version of it, maybe how much it costs. This is something that they're invested in because they have, purchased it, they've eaten it, maybe they've talked with their friends about it. It could be something that's a family recipe. And the background knowledge taps into their familiarity, and it becomes a kind of seamless discussion about how research also incorporates several ingredients, aka sources, and that some taste better or work better than others. This helps bridge the gap from the idea of a recipe, something that they already understand, to the concept of research, which is also an ingredient-filled dish that you're preparing for others. So we encourage examples like this, focusing on initially making connections on a holistic factor that makes general sense to everyone. It's imperative to do this so you set that standard when you first engage with the students. And also it helps level the playing field when you're creating your examples. So basically, create examples that work cross-culturally, that are not something that is simply specific to who you are or where you're from, because that may not resonate with other college students.
And then we try to do things that involve college students, like with our canned topics. How does one thing affect a college student? How would this be a college student versus another age range of people, or a demographic of people? So think about who your students are, their identities, and you obviously don't know them. You're not going to know them intimately. You probably shouldn't, but you need to know them enough to understand where they're coming from and what is going to resonate. And then there's junking jargon. Keith and I, as well as our whole team of librarians, we actively try and avoid the use of library jargon in our instruction. As we previously mentioned, some of it is unavoidable because it is embedded in the core concepts of research and information seeking. But this is inaccessible. It really is. The overarching desire is to make connections with your students and to make connections with the concepts you're teaching them. Relying on library jargon just clouds what we're trying to do. If we talk in this other alien language, it can create more impenetrable barriers beyond just English language. First-year students, especially English language learners, will thrive on simplicity. As a team, we try to embrace the difference. So here are some examples that we've used. Reference help. Simply just help with research. So if we're creating some sort of signage, we're not going to write reference help. We might do research help or something along those lines. Boolean terms. Those are just combining words, like they're in a relationship together using and or. I often say, hey, they're dating, or it's like a mom and a dad, or it's like a brother and a sister. Works cited bibliography. That's giving credit where credit is due. And it's just like at the end of a movie in the credits. Why are those people there? What did they do? Oh, they were all part of it. You have to tell people who they were. An abstract is simply a summary. And no, you cannot quote from the abstract. Please don't take quotes out of that. Read the actual thing. A database, it's an organization of things like Amazon. So we will use Amazon as an example, and we will do a search on Amazon because chances are they've used Amazon before. Limiters, those are just filters, also like on Amazon. So in our Amazon lesson with databases, before we go to anything that is actually a high-level database from the library, we're going to start at Amazon and we're going to tackle those two things. Peer review, just it's many experts have vetted it to make sure it is trustworthy. And then expertise is something that we talk about as well. And then lastly, something like full text. Full text, we just tell them it's the whole thing. It's the whole thing right there. And sometimes there are databases that don't provide that, and you don't have the time to look for that stuff. So yeah, it might seem hyper cognizant, but it takes practice. Remember that you are most certainly not dumbing down your expertise. Rather, you're just making it accessible and understandable to others.
So what can you do other than pet this nice fluffy dog? Oh, he's very cute. So the most recent thing we talked about was jargon. So think about your lessons. What can you do in your lessons or in your speech to make things more translatable by eliminating convoluted vernacular, which is deliberately convoluting the vernacular of this particular sentence here.
Absolutely.
You might find this to be a lot easier than expected. You really will. You want to ensure that your materials that you provide are multimodal. We've said this a bunch. Remember that beyond language barriers, any of your students may have a disability that is affecting the way they process information. Be vigilant where you can in providing accessible materials that different types of learners would appreciate and will thrive from. Pet a dog. You can also pet a cat if you choose. In reality, take a breath, realize Rome wasn't built in a day. If you're doing your best, you should feel comfortable in your lessons. There's always time to look back and fix things. And once you start doing that in your reflection, once you take that step back, you can start deducing ways that you can implement UDL strategies. And as an example, recently, there have been memes about how people prefer to watch their favorite Netflix or Amazon Prime show with subtitles, despite not being, hard of hearing. Perhaps a student feels more comfortable being able to read the words along with the content, or a student is watching the video without headphones or access to sound. Transcriptions and closed captionings are essential in these situations. Maybe a student wants to print out and make notes on an actual transcript. Like we've said before, if you're doing your best and you're considering some of these options as much as you possibly can, everyone's busy, then chances are you're doing a great job. And lastly, do not feel inclined to revamp every single thing at once. This is a process. It's one that we're still going through. We find PDFs all the time that are not readable, that we created, in the past, and we've forgotten about, even though we're still using them. Make the changes that feel right to you. Use your intuition. You're a pro, so rely on your expertise and do what you can. There's always support at institutions, and if there isn't, there are support at peer institutions. There are other people out there who will help you. And overall, we really just want to make sure that our students succeed. That's what we're here for, whether they're, English language learning students from, a far afield as, like I said, China, Russia, Pakistan, or they're, simply a student who maybe needs a little extra help, maybe has a disability, whatever it happens to be, we want them to succeed. And to do that, it really has to be all hands on deck.
And that is it for us. Thank you for coming, and thank you for taking a look at what we've done and what we're continuing to do and how we're changing. We also hope you enjoy Judith Heumann. Personally, she's a hero of mine. I'm really honored to be on the same virtual stage as her. I received her her book for Christmas, and I'm kind of an ultra fan, and I'm kind of fanning out over here. At this point, we're going to put our cameras on, and then we're going to answer any questions that you have. And our emails are in the slides, and the slides are available to you, as well as a references page that's going to just talk about UDL, social constructivist information. And there's also a handout that we have provided with both of the frameworks and examples of activities that you can use. So please feel free to reach out to us whenever you need anything. We will do our best to get back to you as soon as possible. Keith just he's a new dad, but he's back from his leave, and I just got a new dog, so but we'll be there. We'll be there for you.
So you're like a new dad.
I feel like a new dad. I always do.
Oh, I like your camera. Camera's nice.
I know my camera's nice. All right, so do we have any questions?
And I'm looking here, I'm not seeing any
I don't
like
see any either.
coming through in a secret back channel or anything. But we will definitely give everybody a minute to type in any questions that you have. You can use the Q&A or the chat. It was great.
Thank you. And Megan, yeah, that's awesome using Amazon. I'm glad.
Mhm.
Cool. Very, very nice.
Yeah. All
Well,
right.
thank you all. Thank you, Carolyn. And thank you, Caitlin, very much.
You're
Appreciate
very
it.
welcome. Thank you. And thanks for the throw to the next session. That's great. As you said, the next session will start at the top of the hour. So it's going to be in this very room right here. That's in about 10 minutes, our conversation with Judith Heumann. So there won't be a presentation on track B, and we expect everybody coming our way here. So what I'm going to do is just throw on some filler music while we wait for Judy and getting her set up. So Brian and Keith, thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.